Welcome back to my Sorceress leveling walkthrough. We are now in Act 3. The resistance penalty is 20%, so make sure that you check out the vendors in our new town, the Aggorat encampment. Go talk to Survey and Oswald. They will be your best friends for gearing up throughout Act 3. Once you've familiarized yourself with the vendors, go into the jungle ruins and we will be looking for our giant monkey. This boss can one-shot you with his big pillar slam attack, so your best tactic here is to just do what we did at the Act 2 boss again, and surround it in frost walls, cast frost bomb and frost bolts into the frost walls, cast cold snap onto your frost bolts, and just try to keep him frozen, keep him stuck in place, and keep your distance. This boss is really strong, but when you do bring him down, he will have a book of skill for 2 more skill points, and that lets us transition into talking quickly about where we're going to be going on the skill tree. These points, along with the next few level ups, will be going into traveling towards this big intelligence node. I really do recommend this, as it gives you a lot more flexibility with attributes on the traveling nodes, so that you can actually wear items with armor on them. Act 3 has a lot of strong hitting physical monsters, so getting some sources of armor alongside our resistances, lots of life and lots of mana if we can help it, will really help make this act a little bit easier, because otherwise you're just going to be fighting for your life. Next, we are looking for the infested barrens. This is our next zone, and we will be doing a few things here. First of all, we want to grab the waypoint in this zone. Once you've found this waypoint, you want to head to the chimeral wetlands. Go just inside, grab the waypoint, and then go straight back to the infested barrens. This is because we want to actually go over to the azak bog. This area contains a boss fight which will give us an extra plus 30 spirit. It's very important that you do this boss fight, because you will then have 60 total spirit, and it will also give you a level 10 spirit gem, which we will talk more about later. The boss fight in the bog, she's kind of weird. She flies around on a little motorbike of a broom, and she'll put some stuff along the ground that we can quite easily dodge. Same game plan, we're just going to encase her in frost walls, use our spells. She'll fly around on her moped again, and then once she crashes again, same deal, encase her in ice, use your spells, do lots of damage. She does one attack, which is kind of like a bowling alley, similar to Sorceress from PoE 1. So here we can dodge out of the bowling alley, simple. And there it is, the boss should go down. She's going to drop a skull, which gives us plus 30 to spirit. And it also drops us a spear, which is a quest item, which will give you a charm. You can pick whatever charm you want from this. Just take it back to Survey in town. For the uncut spirit gem that you receive from right-clicking on the skull from this boss, you will be able to allocate cast on freeze to your build and then turn it on with right-click. You have to be level 36 to use this gem. I would recommend you just don't use this until you're level 41, because we will be unlocking Comet, and Comet just feels really good with cast on freeze. I know that some people will say to use it with cold snap. Personally, I just don't like this playstyle because it will consume the freeze on the enemy, so anytime you freeze something, it will immediately become unfrozen. I like having that agency, the ability to keep stuff frozen, especially as we're going through these larger zones. You can be battling a lot of monsters at once sometimes. It's just much easier to manage if you can pick and choose what to shatter, what to use your cold snaps on, what to keep frozen. In my opinion, I would just keep hold of cast on freeze, get excited about using it at level 41. You can mess around with it if you want, but I tried it on 2 of my characters and I just didn't like it until we get Comet. Again, this is at level 41. Hang in there. Just keep going through these next zones and powering up. I promise you, it's really good. Okay, rant over. Let's head on to the chimeral wetlands. We are going to go through this area and look for the chimera boss. This is the same chimera that you can get a Twitch drop for if you gift 2 subs to a PoE streamer. So if you want this 3-headed beast to follow you around or to put in your hideout, you know what to do. Go over to Twitch and gift some subs to people. This boss is not really much of a boss. It's more like taking your dog out in the garden and playing fetch. By the time you have some amount of elemental resistance, he doesn't do too much damage. What he will do is he'll fly up into the air and land on these stone pillars. You can actually break the pillars down, and then you get a bunch of free time to DPS the chimera. Then it will fly off again. You kind of just wait until he comes back and then do the same thing again. This boss really doesn't pose much threat. Like I said, it's just like playing with one of your pets, just having a little fun. But once he goes down, he will drop inscribed ultimatum, which is the way to get your second ascension point. You have to do the ultimatum league mechanic from PoE 1. Once again, I won't be covering ascending your characters in this walkthrough. You can go and do that on your own. We are just going to focus on finishing up this chimera boss fight and then walking up the stairs into Jiquani's machinarium. Now this area is all about finding small soul cores so that you can open up stone altars, which will allow you further access into the area. There is a boss fight here, the blackjaw guy. You want to just hide behind pillars or hide behind him, as he's mostly fire-based. He spews a bunch of fire, he slams his hammer on the ground. You can really brute force this boss. Just put your frost walls up, keep casting spells, hide behind the pillars if you see him doing anything remotely threatening. Once Blackjaw goes down, he will drop a permanent buff, which will give you 10% to your fire res. So pick this up and right-click it from your inventory. Continue through the machinarium and into jiquani's sanctum. In here, we need to power up 2 generators by picking up 2 medium soul cores and placing them in one of 2 different generators on opposite sides of the zone. After you've done this, you can teleport out, fill up your flasks, check for vendors if you still need gear upgrades, and then come back via the waypoint back to the start of the zone, and you will be able to fight the warden of the core. This boss will take a ton of damage from our frost walls just because he is a much bigger enemy. His only real threat is this big triangle move that he does. If you stand at either of the 3 points of the blast, you should be able to dodge the wave that comes out afterwards. Other than that, it's just a case of the usual. We're going to keep freezing the boss, and once he goes down, he will drop the large soul core. We can then TP out and go to the infested barrens waypoint. Close to the waypoint should be our quest location where we can slot in the large soul core, and this will open up the waterways area. In the waterways, we will be pushing a bunch of canal levers. It's kind of tedious. The whole area is a bit of a slog. So we're going to take a quick break just to check up on the skill tree, make sure that you guys know what to take next. Specifically, we want to finish off the 3 points at the top of the cold damage tree. This is the +1 to skill gems, the freeze build-up, and the glaciation node for increased cold exposure effect. After this, we are going to take the cold exposure effect wheel, which is next to climate change. This is called overexposure, this wheel. This will be your next 4 or 5 levels, depending on how strong you are at this point. And now let's have a quick compilation of all the levers that you have to pull in this area, including the giant lever at the end, which will then drain all of the water from the sunken city. Go back to town and go down the large set of steps, and all the way at the bottom you will find Alva. She will give you access to the drowned city, sorry, not the sunken city. Inside the drowned city, you just need to continue until you find the apex of filth. Go inside and grab the waypoint. We will come back here, it's just that we've got to go back to the drowned city and find the molten vault. This area is going to have a boss which will drop an item which will allow us to unlock the reforging bench. It's a pretty easy fight. Once again, he's a big guy, so our frost walls will do a lot of damage to him. He will get frozen a lot. Once he takes a certain amount of damage, he will run off into the lava, and then he will send a bunch of waves of fire at us. You've got to play a bit of Dance Dance Revolution to dodge these. You can still attack the boss, but I feel like he gets a sort of damage reduction during this phase, or just a bunch of resists. Wait for him to come back out, or just send out frost bolts to try and get some freeze build-up. Once he comes back out, we can start damaging him again. Try to sidestep his other slams that he does, volcanic fissures, or basic slams, basic forward-facing slams. Keep doing damage to him until he drops the hammer that we're looking for, the quest item. Take this back to town and talk to Oswald, and you would have unlocked the reforging bench. This is your 3-to-1 vendor recipe from PoE1, if you're familiar with that at all. Basically, you will be able to use 3 of the same item and make a completely new one from it. This is really powerful. It's useful for a bunch of different items. After that, we can go back to the Apex of Filth, and we need to look for another boss. We just hit level 41, so it's time to finally talk about Cast on Freeze. Now, first of all, you're going to want to make sure that on your skill tree, you have this meta skills gain 8% increased energy node, this very small node, or you can get this mod on a sapphire, and you can put this sapphire in a jewel socket on your build. This is what I chose to do, as it saves me respecking a bunch of my exposure points. After this, you can use a level 11 skill gem and unlock Comet. Socket Comet inside of your Cast on Freeze. Once you have a level 2 support gem, you can use Impetus. This will make it so that this Cast on Freeze setup gains more energy. Combined with the points on our sapphire or on the tree, anytime we freeze something, we will trigger Cast on Freeze, which will trigger Comet. This just feels really satisfying to play, and this will help us as we go through the next zones. Since we can now drop level 2 support gems, it's worth just going over every single skill gem and support gem that we will be using for the rest of our leveling through Act 3 and through the entirety of Cruel difficulty. This was the setup that I used, so for Frost Bolt, we are still using Glaciation, we are still using Scattershot, and after I got a Jeweler's Orb, I socketed Wild Shards. Now what this will do is it has a 20% chance to give us this thing, this like radius of 8 extra projectiles in a circle. It's really good for applying just as much freeze as possible. I would recommend socketing this if you get a jeweler's orb. Our frost wall, we are currently using spell cascade. We are using ingenuity just because it has a 3-second cooldown. Frost walls will come off cooldown faster. And then again, if you get a jeweler's orb, I tried using glacier or icicle. I'm not really sure which is better right now. I recommend for the campaign that you just use icicle, and you would either take this increased crystal life or you would take the reduced crystal life. It really depends which support gem you're using. I don't know which is better. I would just have to test it more. Frost bomb is the same. We are still using fast forward, although when you get level 2 supports, you can add strip away, which will increase the effect of the cold exposure from frost bomb. I socketed this with arcane tempo just because I had an extra jeweler's orb, and a little bit of extra cast speed is nice, but I think that this is kind of wasted. You don't need to do this. The first 2 support gems are good enough. That's fast forward and strip away. Next we have hypothermia, which is just a negative cold resistance curse. You can use this with heightened curse and persistence, just so that the curse lasts longer on enemies. But do be warned, the mana cost is very high. If you don't have a lot of mana on your items, this is just going to drain all of your mana flash charges, especially on bosses. If you run out of mana, it's kind of game over. It turns into a war of attrition. We are still using Cold Snap to left click on frozen enemies. It's socketed with Control Destruction and Unleash, just like it has been for the rest of this playthrough. And finally, we have our newest additions to the ensemble, which is Cast on Freeze, which is socketed with Comet. We have Inspiration, Impetus, and for the 4th link, if you get a greater Jeweler's Orb, I recommend taking Cold Mastery just to get an extra level to the supported skill gem. Gem levels in this game have an insane amount of damage, and Comet has the highest base damage, so it makes sense to add this. Once you get a lesser Jeweler's Orb, I recommend adding Inspiration, because the mana cost will go down a ton and you will be triggering so many comets that you basically need this. I want to say this is mandatory as soon as you can get a jeweler's orb. You want to use it on cast on freeze and then add inspiration. Once you get an upgraded jeweler's orb, I can't remember which one it is, if it's greater or perfect, you can then slot in cold mastery. This will make it so that our comet is even higher gem level and it will do even more damage. So we have our cast on freeze setup, which has comet. But when we freeze bosses, we can also self-cast our own comet. I recommend doing this because bosses can't attack you back most of the time when they're frozen, and the most damage and bang for our buck that we can get is to place our frost walls and then cast our own comet setup, which has either concentrated effect and elemental focus, or if you only want to use it one time, you can socket in hourglass, and this will give it a plus 10-second cooldown on some of the Act 3 bosses and even the cruel difficulty bosses. I did not like hourglass. I instead preferred to place arcane tempo and damage supports such as these two. This is because Comet has a pretty long cast time. That's the whole downside of it, having such high base damage, is that it takes a long time to cast. But if you only cast it one time, you just go back to your lower damaging spells. Bosses can stay frozen for 4 to 6 seconds, so you could actually just cast Comet 2 or 3 times during this freeze. I will be using this for this playthrough, and I recommend you do the same. Hourglass is a personal preference. I personally just didn't like it. I would rather cast a few more Comets on top of my frost walls just to do extra damage. At the end of the Apex of Filth, we will be able to fight this rather large woman. Basically just move around her. She's very clumsy. The boss isn't too hard, and at this point we're doing a decent amount of damage, and we're even getting our comet procs on cast on freeze, which feels very nice. Once the queen goes down, you want to pick up the temple door idol, go back to town, and then go back down the stairs and talk to Alva once again, and we will be able to go into the temple of Kopec. This zone has just a giant fireball in the center, which will deal more burning damage to you the closer you get to it. So it wants you to just sneak around the edges and go through the zones. But you can kind of cut corners, take some of the damage, heal up, and just run through to the next area. Continue through the temple until you get to the boss. This boss is such a pushover. All we have to do is keep putting down frost walls, keep sending out spells, and he dies really, really fast. Once he's dealt with, you can speak to Alva, and then we will be back on the surface, and we can go through the gateway to the past. It's worth noting that if you want to use any vendors or do anything back in town, you're going to have to go back through the gateway because we are literally in the past. These people don't exist. So if you do want to upgrade your gear, which I do recommend, these next few zones, which will be the end zones for Act 3, they are all very difficult. You take a lot of physical damage. You take a lot of chaos damage through poison. You take a lot of cold damage from the Eye of Winter guys who send out like a blue orb. That's Eye of Winter. This is a really good opportunity to grab extra gear upgrades, as this next area is going to be pretty tough. So once you have fought your way through Utzaal, you will end up in this arena. There will be just a bunch of soldiers surrounding you. Alva will walk up and get punched in the face. And this is your boss fight against Viper. This is probably my favorite boss fight in the entire game. And it's really funny because we kind of make a joke out of it. It's still hard. You can still die. And I will go over the mechanics. But Frost Wall makes it such a funny fight because we pollute so much of the arena with our Frost Walls. So it can be kind of hard to see at times. First mechanic we need to talk about is when Viper says Arakali's web. She will become invulnerable and she will fly above you, sending out green projectiles to her soldiers. The soldiers then glow green and they will stab forward. You need to move out of the way of this. The very last attack in this barrage of attacks, it will be an end-to-end, one-at-a-time Mexican wave style attack, and you need to roll through it. So you need to recognize which way it starts at and which way it's going, and then roll across it. After that, you can go back to using your frost walls and self-casting your comets. This will be pretty much all of our damage that we do in this boss fight, as it's nice and fast, and we need to also break the ice walls so that we can see the arena. The other attack that Viper will do when she floats into the air, you can damage her during. She will place a bunch of small red circles on the floor. Halfway through this attack, she will put large purple circles on the floor instead, which track your character. There will be an inner circle which expands. When it reaches the outer edge, it will then detonate. Move into the space of previously detonated circles, just so that you're not stepping on top of existing circles. If you don't place circles properly, you will end up overlapping or walking on circles that are exploding. This is a common way for you to die, just like the Arakali's web attack. All her other mechanics are pretty inconsequential for us, because we either block them out with our frost walls, or we can just sidewalk her actual projectile attacks that she sends out when she makes little snake heads with her fists, and then she goes like throw up your frost walls and keep spamming comet, and you should take down Viper pretty easily. If it takes you a few tries, it's fine. Trust me, I died like 5 times just trying to record and get the perfect strategy for this build. Continue through Utzaal and make sure that you pick up a sacrificial heart. This should just drop randomly from monsters that you kill in this zone. Make sure that you do get this as you go into the next area, as you will be using it on a sacrificial altar with the ceremonial dagger, and this will give you +2 skill points. Once again, more skill points. Continue through Aggorat until you reach the Black Chambers, and this will be the final zone of Act 3. Continue through this area until you reach the very end, and you will be fighting Doriani, the Act 3 boss. Our frost walls don't really do too much damage to Doriani. Maybe it's his hitbox is really weird. He is floating and it just doesn't feel very consistent. Just try to do your best to damage him and encase him in ice. Use your comets. You will block a lot of his mechanics with your frost wall, but sometimes it does penetrate frost walls. It's weird. So try to keep some distance. You will see this like Roomba in the center of the screen appear that begins to rotate, and it will flash and it will do some beams of light. You obviously want to avoid these, as these do damage. You can also set off these landmines and walk out of them whilst the boss is doing its bullshit in the corner. You want to try and freeze Doriani as much as you can. Save your frost wall charges until he's standing still. Use them all up, freeze him, cast your comets, and then do enough damage to get him into phase 2. This part of the boss gets destroyed because it's such a large enemy. Our frost walls will do a lot more damage because more ice crystals will be exploding. Now, the tactic here is just to stay along its side. Don't look at it face on or be directly behind it, and just try to sidewalk along with it as it rotates. Our best course of action is to just keep sidewalking the boss. You do get like a big supercharge up slam that he does, which is lightning damage, and he has this self-destruction move, which there'll be another circle on the floor indicating the blast radius. Again, you just try and roll out to the edge of the arena for both of these mechanics, and then focus on freezing the boss again with your frost walls. Generally speaking, this boss should go down pretty fast. Don't worry if it takes you a few tries, you just have to familiarize yourself with its basic attacks. Keep stacking up the damage, make sure that you're frost walling, frost bomb for cold exposure, and the boss will go down. And congratulations, you beat Act 3, you beat the Path of Exile 2 campaign for what it is in early access, and now you get to do it again in cruel difficulty, where pretty much everything is the same. A lot of the rewards are the same, a few of them are different. Specifically, you don't get a second spirit reward in Act 1, but you do get another one in Act 3 in the Azak bog, like we showed you in this video. Go and do that again in cruel difficulty, and then you will have a total of 100 spirit from the campaign. If you want me to do a video on cruel difficulty, a more abridged one, what to take, what to do, then let me know. I spent a really long time recording a new character, editing all of this down and doing a voiceover. I haven't really got to play too much of the end game yet, but I'm hoping that I can do that now, blast a bunch of maps, make my chronomancer build that I want to make a guide on. I'm just really excited to be able to play the game after putting quite a lot of effort into this walkthrough, so I hope that someone out there appreciates it. I hope that it helps someone, and I will be streaming this game, so if you do want to check out my stream, all the links will be in the description. Good luck with your characters, good luck with your playthroughs, have fun with this game. I think it's awesome. It's tough, but it's very challenging. I really like a challenge personally. With that said, thanks for watching my walkthrough, well done, and I will see you for more PoE2 content soon.